A couple of months ago, Giant introduced the brand new Anthem and Anthem X. Nick travelled over to Taiwan for the official launch, where he had the opportunity to test out both bikes and see how they're manufactured in Giant's own factory. Around the same time, I received this Anthem test bike, which I've been putting to the test on my home trails for the past couple of months. Having reviewed the previous Anthem back in 2022, I was very keen to see just how different the new version would be. Now in this video, I'll be discussing what I like about the new Anthem, what it struggles with, and how it compares to some of the best cross-country bikes currently on the market. The Anthem is Giant's flagship cross-country race bike. The latest version gets a brand new frame and a bump in travel to 120mm front and rear, and that puts it right in line with the Scott Spark, the Orbea Oise and the Specialized Epic. It still features a flex stay suspension design, but the shock has been flipped up to sit within a hollowed out pocket in the top tube. There's now room for 2 bottles in the front triangle, and Giant has also built in a 2-position flip chip in the forward shock mount, a first for the Anthem platform. The shock itself has a longer stroke, a bigger volume and a custom tune, and combined with the updated leverage curve, the back end feels very different, which I'll discuss in more detail shortly. At this point in time, the new Anthem is only produced in carbon fibre. It is the same frame whether you buy the cheapest or most expensive model, however, which differs to brands like Scott and Santa Cruz. For those who want to nerd out on all of the construction details, be sure to check out Nick's video from the Anthem launch, where he got a sneak peek into how these bikes are made. According to Giant, the new Anthem is both lighter and stiffer than the previous version. The bare painted frame is listed at 1,530 grams, which goes up to a bit over 1,800 grams when you add in the shock. Now that's actually about the same as the previous Anthem frame that I was able to weigh in my own workshop, so I'm a little bit skeptical about Giant's claims. However, that isn't a takeaway from the fact that this is still one of the lightest options currently on the market. Alongside the new Anthem, Giant is also reintroducing the Anthem X. It uses the same frame but adds in downtube storage, a 130mm travel fork, chunkier tyres and a more upright cockpit to provide a less race-focused package. You'll find more info on the Anthem X in our launch article and video. Here I'll be mostly focusing on the regular Anthem. Compared to the previous version, there have been some minor updates to the geometry. The head angle is a bit slacker at 67 degrees, and the seat tube angle is a smidge steeper at 76 degrees. The reach does stay the same at 450mm on our medium-sized test bike, and the rear centre length comes in at 435mm on all 4 frame sizes. The main change to fit comes from the higher stack due to the longer travel fork. The bottom bracket also sits lower due to the extra suspension sag. Compared to the old bike, this results in a more stable in-the-bike feel. Now note that all of those numbers are with the flip chip in the high setting. Put that in low and the angles slacken out by ½ a degree and the bottom bracket drops by 6mm. Personally, I found the low position was too low, resulting in issues with pedal clearance. Realistically, the flip chip is there to accommodate the change in BB height between a 120 and a 130mm travel fork. As such, from the factory, the Anthem comes set up in the high position and the Anthem X comes in the low position. There are 6 models in the Anthem lineup, with prices starting at 7,399 Australian dollars and going up to a gobsmacking 19 grand. I decided to pick the Anthem Advanced SL1, which sits in the middle of the range and costs 11,000 Australian dollars. This bike comes with a RockShox SID fork and a SID Lux shock, both of the Select Plus variety, which means they're functionally identical to the Ultimate versions. They're cabled up to a twin lock remote, which allows you to switch between open, pedal and lock modes on the fly. There's a SRAM GX Axis transmission, Shimano XT brakes, and several new Giant components, including a one-piece carbon cockpit, a lightweight 2-position dropper, and the XCR wheel set. Coming in under 1,400 grams, these feature carbon rims, carbon spokes, and a unique free hub mechanism that delivers 120 points of engagement. Giant then wraps these wheels with a pair of Maxxis Aspen tyres in a 2.4-inch width. Confirmed weight for our Giant Anthem test bike is 10.8 kilos without pedals and with the tyres set up tubeless. That's impressively light for the mid-spec model, and it is notably lighter than many of Giant's competitors. If you want to see some comparisons, be sure to check out the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. I've gone into a lot of detail about fit and suspension setup because there are some quirks when it comes to dialing in this bike. If you're interested, just click the link in the video description below to check it out. Now, from the very first ride, I was impressed with just how much plusher the new Giant Anthem is compared to the outgoing model. Small bump sensitivity was already good on the old bike, but the new frame takes it up a few notches and carries on that suppleness throughout its extended travel. With the light damper tune and the increased leverage through the mid-stroke, the Anthem delivers excellent grip and square edge compliance over rocky terrain. There is some shock movement if you're chopping at the pedals, and that's exacerbated if you're running 25% sag or more. Keep it under 25% and the platform is considerably firmer. There's enough anti-squat to stabilize the back end when you're pedaling forcefully, and you've always got the twist lock remote to access the pedal or lock modes when required. With its low profile tires and sub 11 kilo weight, it's no surprise that the Anthem is quick off the mark. Better yet, putting the power down highlights just how much stiffness there is through the frame and wheels. Despite this, the Anthem is remarkably smooth when pedaling through chunk. I was worried it was going to be a bit too pingy, but I never found it to be uncomfortable or difficult to control. Indeed, it's a great descender and it carries momentum well across rough and undulating trails. While the bars did put me further forward on steep descents than I would have liked, the Anthem consistently pulled me through. The dynamic BB is low and the rear wheel gets out of the way quickly, bolstering stability when ripping downhill at speed. Traction is good for the most part, though the Aspens do have a habit of locking up when panic braking on loose surfaces. Keep it cool and the suspension will mostly keep the tyres driving into the ground. I'll also say that 140mm travel dropper post is also a boon on the descents. You can get the saddle right out of the way and that aids freedom of movement on jumps and drops. It also means you can get properly low and reef the bars from side to side, making the Anthem an incredible bike to corner with. Again, the stiff chassis and wheels come into play here, as does the sensitive suspension and the supple high volume tyres. All of this gives the Anthem a really fun and trail bikey feel, and it makes it much more capable than its predecessor. I can see this new platform translating really well to the Anthem X, which would be an absolute hoot with its bigger fork and chunkier tyres. As for downsides, with its plusher ride quality, the Anthem isn't as snappy as dedicated short travel sprinters like the Epic World Cup, the Super Caliber and the Lux, and the handling isn't quite as telepathic on flatter trails. Now, if the terrain is smooth, it is worth making use of the pedal mode, which firms up the suspension a lot and sharpens up the steering response. I found it to be especially useful on steep climbs where it lifted the ride height and helped to stabilize the seated position. The fork is also better able to resist diving, which is great for out of the saddle efforts when you're sprinting or overtaking. Throw in some rocks and technical features, however, and things aren't quite as rosy. The firm damping is particularly noticeable in the fork, which tends to bounce off sharp edges and pass on more feedback through your hands. Flicking the remote back into the open mode immediately boosts comfort and traction, albeit at the expense of the shock sinking into its stroke, slackening the seat angle and reducing pedal clearance. Now, there are some other XC bikes on the market that take a more nuanced approach to suspension tuning. The Orbea Ois, for example, leaves the fork's compression damping open when you're in the middle mode. This allows the fork to continue absorbing bumps and maintaining grip while the shock firms up and pushes you forward. The Epic, on the other hand, uses custom valving for both the shock and the fork, with its magic middle setting pairing a firm platform with a very sensitive breakaway. In both cases, I found that middle suspension mode to be much more effective on technical single track. However, I will acknowledge that my local trails are very rocky and bumpy, and they tend to suit a more traction-biased suspension design. On smoother machine-built flow trails, the Anthem's firm platform does work well, providing great responsiveness, especially when you're standing up on the pedals. Moving to price, I think it's worth acknowledging that the Anthem has long been a popular choice with Aussie cross-country riders and racers, in part due to its value for money. However, the entry point for the new bike has jumped up a lot, with the cheapest model selling for well over $7,000. I do think the Anthem Advanced SL1 here is a great race-ready package out of the box, and it's also one of the lightest in its category, but there are competitors offering a similar level of spec for less cash. As you'll see in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com, that includes the Norco Revolver, the Santa Cruz Blur, and the Trek Super Caliber. With that in mind, I think there's room for Giant to sharpen up the pricing, and I'd love to see an alloy model introduced as well. As for the components on our test bike, most have performed well with a couple of exceptions. The Switch SL dropper was a little sticky from day one, which worsened over time to the point where it wouldn't always return to full height. This led to a few surprise moments where I'd go to sit back on the saddle and it would slam all the way back down. The replacement post has been a lot smoother, though it has just started to exhibit a small amount of friction, so I really hope it's not going to suffer the same fate. The 140mm of drop is otherwise fantastic for descending, though the two-position function means you've got a long squat every time you want to lower the saddle. That can get fatiguing over a couple of hours of racing, and I also miss the ability to partially drop the saddle for technical climbs. While I really like the level of grip and damping from the Maxxis Aspen tyres, the rear has suffered the most amount of punctures that I've experienced for some time. Despite the cush core insert, there are now a dozen plugs doing their best to keep air inside that tyre. Now, it could have just been really bad luck, or it might be indicative that these are race-only tyres that aren't suited to rocky terrain. Even with all those punctures, the XCR wheels haven't flinched. These are sturdy, responsive, and quite loud due to that buzzy free hub mechanism. It's worth noting that the carbon spokes can be more susceptible to damage, and if you do break one, you'll need to remove the tyre and the rim tape to access the nipple driver on the inside of the rim. Needless to say, that's not the sort of thing you want to do over a race weekend. Giant's new integrated cockpit certainly looks trick, but at 295 grams, it's no lighter than a conventional two-piece setup. It also costs $700, making it an expensive exercise should you wish to try a longer or shorter stem. Furthermore, the non-conventional shape makes it virtually impossible to fit lights and accessories that use a round clamp, which is worth noting if you're going to be using this bike for winter training. I'm also not a fan of the headset cable routing, which adds complication when it comes time to replace a cable or service the bearings. And it's also a bit of a concern that there's no protective sleeve around the fork steerer tube to prevent rubbing against the cables and brake hose. However, Giant says that this kind of integration is what its customers are asking for, and at the end of the day, I'm not the one buying this bike. As for comparisons, well, given how much the specialized Epic is referenced throughout the Anthem's press release, it's clear that Giant considers that bike to be the benchmark in the XC category. I'd be inclined to agree with that assertion, and it's easy to spot the similarities between the two. If you want to know how the Anthem compares to the Epic, I put a detailed comparison in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. Check that out if you get the chance, and if you've got any questions for me about the new Anthem and any of its competitors, make sure you drop those into the comments below. To wrap things up, I reckon the new generation Giant Anthem represents a significant leap forward for this XC platform. The reworked suspension layout finally provides room for two bottles, which is welcome, but more crucially, it's also improved grip and reactivity. Combined with the extra travel and the big volume shock, the Anthem is no doubt calmer and more comfortable to ride over rough terrain. It is a significantly better descender, in part due to the updated geometry and the long stroke dropper post. What's particularly impressive is that it manages to achieve all of that while maintaining its low weight and boosting stiffness. That's enhanced by the new XCR wheels, which are fast, responsive and sturdy. All of these improvements don't come for free though. The Anthem has gotten more expensive, and the move to an integrated cockpit has reduced some of the practicality that made previous models such a popular choice with privateer racers. Not everyone's going to be bothered by that, however, and indeed many will be drawn to the sharp, futuristic looks. Ultimately, when you have that one-piece handlebar between the race tape, there is no denying that this is one incredibly fast and capable XC bike. Right, that's all from me, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this video review, and we'll see you in the next one. Dooroo!